Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into the hush of a medieval brook, moonlit, stone-edged, and echoing with the quiet rhythm of three washerwomen singing old lullabies to the water. It's the kind of place where sound floats rather than travels, and even the frogs seem too drowsy to croak. You're not in the middle of anything urgent. You're barefoot finally, and your toes press gently into wet grass while mist curls softly around your ankles. Honestly, you probably won't survive this night. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's just too cozy to come back from. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I want to see which part of the world is yawning right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself wandering just beyond the edge of a medieval village, far enough from the cottages that even the smoke has gone quiet. The trees thin out, and ahead, a gentle stream catches the moonlight like silver thread. You hear it before you see it, a soft humming, not exactly words, but not wind either. Like lullabies meant only for linen. As you approach the water, you spot them. Three washerwomen, dressed in long woolen gowns, are kneeling beside smooth stones embedded in the bank. Their hands move in that repetitive, trance-like rhythm. Lift, dunk, ring, beat. Each motion so perfectly timed with the next, you wonder if they've been doing this for centuries. You lower yourself onto a flat rock, careful not to disturb them. But one of the women looks over her shoulder and smiles. Not startled, just as if she already knew you'd come. The brook babbles softly, threading beneath the stones, tugging at hems and ribbons floating in its shallows. The fabric they're washing isn't just dirty, it's tired. You can feel it in the way the cloth sighs beneath their hands, as if grateful for the ritual. There's no rush, no soap bubbles, just cold water, moonlight, and a rhythm older than bedtime. The oldest woman, face creased like the folds of her apron, finally speaks without looking up. They say water remembers. You blink, unsure whether she's talking to you or to the brook itself. She continues, "If you wash cloth by day, it's clean. But if you wash it by night, it dreams." You don't ask what she means. You just stay still, absorbing the steady splash of linen meeting stone and the hum that lives somewhere between breath and song. Back then, in the real Middle Ages, night wasn't a time to waste energy. Firewood was precious, and candles were expensive. Most villagers were asleep after sunset. But there were always exceptions: midwives, scribes, alchemists, and yes, washerwomen. Because not all things should be washed by sunlight. In some rural parts of Europe, people believed that moonlight could cleanse not just dirt, but energy. Cloth washed under the waxing moon, it was said, retained blessings. Cloth washed during the waning moon might absorb sorrow. And on full moons, well, best not wash anything personal. Let the moon soak up the madness on its own. A frog plops into the water beside you, breaking the silence just enough to reset your ears. One of the women chuckles softly, not stopping her rhythm. The smell here is earthy: linen, moss, old water, and something sweet and faintly sharp. You realize it's coming from their baskets, bundled herbs, not for scent, but for safety. In certain villages, people believed that lavender or rosemary tucked between sheets could keep nightmares away, especially for children. It was less about the plant and more about the intention. Every part of sleep, bed, cloth, scent, had meaning. You dip your fingers into the water. It's icy, sharp, the kind of cold that wakes your bloodstream, even as your eyelids drift. You wonder how they can bear it, but then again, they probably don't feel the cold the same way you do. Your gaze follows the floating ribbons of a nearly washed sheet. The woman dips it one last time, wrings it slowly, and lays it flat against the rocks. She hums louder now, a note that lands on your shoulders like a woolen shawl. Historians still argue whether these night rituals were purely practical or quietly magical, Was it necessity, privacy, or something deeper, woven into the folds? There's an odd warmth here, despite the chill in the air. Like your skin recognizes this place even if your mind doesn't. You look back upstream. No torches, no signs of the village anymore. Just mist and stone, and women who hum to the fabric as if it might respond. And maybe it does. Because you notice something strange now. The cloth isn't drying the way you'd expect. Not stiff and crisp, but soft, almost glowing. It catches the moonlight like frost, and each thread looks newly spun. "You'll sleep better tonight," says the second woman, still not looking at you. You're not sure if she means you or the cloth, but she's right either way. You press your palms to the stone and feel its chill sink into your hands. Somehow, you're more grounded here than you've been in days, and you can't tell whether the lullaby you hear is coming from them or from your own memory. Then, just beneath their voices, you hear another whisper. The brook. As if it's singing back. The washerwomen hum, the moon holds steady, and your thoughts begin to loosen, thread by thread. You lean back on your elbows now, letting the curve of the stone cradle you like the edge of an old armchair. The brook flows to your left, never rushing, just weaving calmly over small pebbles and worn roots. The hum of the washerwomen fades into the hush of flowing water, and for a moment, you wonder how long you've been here. Minutes? Hours? Or were you always meant to arrive at this exact time, on this exact night, with your breath slowing to match the water's pace? One of the women rises, tall, reed thin, with silver hair braided thickly down her back, and points gently uphill. Her hand doesn't tremble. It simply guides your eyes. "The village sleeps in linen," she says softly, like you already know what that means. And now you see it. Beyond the curve of the brook, across a knoll flecked with thyme and clover, the village begins. Not a grand one, just a handful of timber-framed cottages, their rooftops draped in moss. But what strikes you isn't the architecture. It's what's hanging between the homes. Cloth, lines and lines of it. Pale fabric hung between windows, across doorways, between fence posts and apple trees. It flutters faintly in the breeze, each one caught in mid-sway like a flag without a country. Some cloths are patterned, some plain. But all of them, every single one, is clean. Quiet, hanging like prayers left out for the wind. The washerwoman's voice floats behind you again, more of a murmur than a statement. If a house leaves its linens out, it means they welcome dreams. You nod, not because it makes logical sense, but because it does. In that quiet way, dreams make sense when you're just about to fall asleep. In medieval households, linen was the core of comfort. Bedding, towels, clothing linings. The softest cloths weren't bought, but earned, worn down from years of washing until they no longer scratched the skin, but settled into it like a second layer. That's why people didn't throw linen away. They reused it, repurposed it, even buried it with their dead. The finest sheets were often passed down like secrets, and during plagues, many believed that linen soaked in vinegar could keep sickness at bay. You step forward, drawn to the nearest home where a large white cloth dances gently from a wooden beam. It's patterned with tiny hand-stitched blue swirls, almost too faint to notice unless the wind catches it just right. That one, the washerwoman says behind you, was sung to for 3 nights. You turn. She doesn't need to explain further, because here's something else you didn't know. In some medieval villages, women would hum lullabies to fabric meant for the very young or very ill. It wasn't just superstition. It was survival. A belief that comfort could be embedded, that peace could be sewn in like a hidden seam, waiting to be touched later, when needed most. One of the younger washerwomen, barely more than a girl really, moves beside you now. Her hands are stained lightly with indigo, and her eyes are that stormy gray that only appears just before dawn. She offers you a cloth. Not just any cloth, a folded square of linen, embroidered in the corners with stars. "For your dreams," she says, You reach out slowly, taking it in both hands. It's warm, strangely warm, as if it had been sitting in sunlight, even though the moon has ruled the sky all evening. Do I hang it? You ask, unsure of the rules in this woven dream. She shakes her head. You sleep with it near your window. Let the night pass through it. You nod. Of course. Historians still argue whether these customs were mystical, maternal, or just beautiful metaphors. Did they truly believe that fabric could hold dreams? Or were the rituals simply ways of bringing order and intention to hard lives, where death and discomfort were always just around the corner? But standing here, surrounded by cloth whispering in the breeze, it feels like more than metaphor. It feels like memory. You move down the village path, each home quiet behind shuttered windows. Cats perch on fence posts. A dog snores beside a lantern. Everything is still, but not abandoned, not lifeless, just resting. You reach a cottage with a tall wooden frame and thick curtains drawn tightly. But outside, 5 pieces of linen flutter across the garden gate, each one stitched with a different flower. You count them slowly. 1 for rosemary, remembrance. 1 for lavender, peace. 1 for marigold, protection. 1 for chamomile, dreams. And the last, woven with a faded iris, its meaning lost to you, but not to the wind. You gently touch the last one, and it responds like skin, warm and soft and knowing. A sleepy bell tolls from the far chapel, distant, but crisp. 3 slow chimes that melt into the night like steam. One of the washerwomen calls gently from behind, her voice a melody of vowels. The water's slowing. You glance back toward the brook. She's right. The stream has narrowed slightly, as if tired from the work. Even water must sleep eventually. You look again to the village. The linen dances. Not wildly at all. Just enough to say, you're safe. You breathe in deeply. Cool air, fabric, earth, and let it all settle inside your chest. And in that moment, you understand. This village doesn't just sleep in linen, it breathes through it. You make your way back down the hill toward the brook, the soft grass folding under your feet like a hush in motion. The washerwomen are still there, barefoot, patient, ancient in rhythm, but not in age. One of them looks up, pats the stone beside her and says, "Come, you've seen how they sleep. Now watch how we wake what's hidden." You sit again, folding your legs as she dips another piece of cloth into the water. This one's heavier, darker, not dyed but dense with time. Maybe a cloak, maybe a curtain. She lays it across the stone and begins the ritual. Not scrubbing at all. She folds it gently, then presses the folded edge against the rock, then unfolds, then folds again. Beat, unfold, beat, fold. You almost don't catch it, but her fingertips are tapping a rhythm. 3 short taps, 1 long, repeating. At first you think it's habit, then you realize it's a code. Every family has their rhythm, she murmurs, not looking at you. We don't write names into linens, we write rhythms. And now you understand. These washerwomen aren't just cleaning clothes, they're reading them. In medieval villages, most people couldn't write, but hands could speak, through stitches, through folds, through beats tapped gently into fabric like braille made of breath. So when a daughter washed her mother's shawl, she'd remember the folds, the way the hem flipped, the secret rhythm tapped into its fibers over years of use. Even now, the woman's hands are telling a story through the beat. 3 taps, pause, 1 long press. It's a signature, a song only the family would know. Not meant for the eyes, meant for the fingertips, for the cloth to remember so the story wouldn't disappear. Historians still argue whether this form of textile memory was deliberate or a romantic exaggeration, but plenty of folk practices suggest otherwise. In parts of medieval Scandinavia and Wales, cloths were folded in patterns that signified illness, birth, or mourning, then stored in homes like silent archives. You glance at your own lap, suddenly aware of how little you know about your own sheets, the folds, the creases, the hands that washed them before you. The second washerwoman, the one with woad-stained fingernails, begins humming again. Her voice is light, but steady, almost like a thread itself. She's working with a plain linen shirt now, yellowed from time and thick in the cuffs. "This one belonged to the blacksmith," she says. "He passed last spring. His daughter sent it for cleansing." You nod slowly, uncertain how to respond. She said it still smelled like him, of iron and warmth. Her hum softens, like she's humming to the man inside the shirt, not the shirt itself. You wonder if all the washerwomen across the world ever thought about the lives held in fibers. Because cloth is memory. It touches us more than people do. It holds tears, blood, sweat, joy. It hides secrets. It shelters bodies. It shrouds the dead. And here, under the moon, the brook knows all of it. The third washerwoman, quiet until now, leans back with a sigh, her long braid trailing in the moss. "This one," she says, "fought me." You watch her lift a patchwork quilt out of the water, heavy and resistant. The fabric seems to hold its own shape, like it doesn't want to unfold. She holds it up toward the moon. There's a slight shimmer. Only then do you see it. A faint, stitched phrase, curved into the hem. Words in a dialect you can't read, half faded by time. But you know it's a name, maybe a blessing, maybe a curse. "Some cloth holds on," she says. "It has a harder time letting go." She lays the quilt flat on the stone, fingers brushing over each square like she's reading pages of a book. "Sometimes," she adds gently, "you have to ask it to forgive." You say nothing, because what would you even say to that? You sit with the thought, with the silence, and you watch the water carry threads downstream, like ghosts without names. One of the women begins collecting pins, long old ones, their metal darkened by time. She uses them to hold a scarf in place while it dries in a specific fold. Not to preserve its shape, but to preserve its meaning. You hadn't realized how intentional all of this was. Washing here is not utility. It's ceremony. It's memory care. It's therapy stitched in silence. You hear a whisper beside you and realize it's not from the women. It's the brook. The stones beneath it are clicking gently against one another, shifting with the weight of time. It's a sound like wind chimes made of secrets. And you finally understand what they've been doing this whole time. They're not cleaning the cloth. They're cleaning the stories inside it, letting go what no longer belongs, softening what remains, preserving what matters. So maybe tonight, when you lie down and your blanket touches your chin, you'll think about the hands that washed it, the threads that remember, the folds that speak. Maybe the next time you fold a shirt, you'll hum. Maybe you'll tap a rhythm of your own, just to leave something behind for the moon to find. The moon is higher now, not quite full, but swollen with silver light that trickles through the leaves and paints everything in a faint, glowing hush. Even your breath seems quieter under it. The washerwomen have slowed a little, as if the brook's lullaby is starting to tug at their muscles too. One of them, her apron damp, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, turns her face to the sky and whispers, "Good night for it. Air's clean. No rot in the wind." You glance around, confused at first. Everything smells like moss and old rain. But she's not talking about the scent. She's talking about the night air itself. She looks at you, eyes gentle but serious. Air matters, especially after sunset. You wait for her to go on, and she does. Some nights the air soaks blessings into the cloth. Others, it presses sorrow into it. You swallow. She nods toward a line of drying linens beside the brook. "That one," she says, pointing to a cloth-dyed dusky rose, "was washed on a morning night. Wind came from the east, carried the grief of 3 towns." You glance again at the cloth, and for the first time you notice how it sags just a little lower than the others. Not torn, just tired. In medieval times, villagers often believed that air after dark carried spiritual residue, the breath of ghosts, the sighs of ancestors. If a cloth was washed or dried on the wrong kind of night, especially near a death, it could catch that energy and carry it into the home. That's why some people only hung their bedding after moonrise, when the pure air had drifted in from the forest or sea. Others believed night air was inherently dangerous and would only wash indoors, under tightly shuttered windows. Historians still debate how literal these beliefs were. Were they metaphors for trauma? Superstitions rooted in weather patterns? Or did medieval folk truly feel the emotional weight of the wind? The washerwoman rises slowly, a bar of something pale in her hand. "Smell," she says, holding it out. You lean in. It's faint, earthy, herbal, almost smoky. "Soaproot," she explains. "Pulled it from the western hill 2 nights ago. Cleans without killing the cloth." The bar isn't soap in the way you know it. It's rough, wrapped in cloth itself, and tied with a loop of string. "Not for dirt," she murmurs, almost to herself. "For energy." She gently rubs it along the edge of a shroud, and you swear you hear a small sigh escape from the linen. You blink. She doesn't react, so you don't ask. Instead, she continues, almost dreamlike. "You know why we hum? Because cloth listens. It doesn't understand language, but tone, rhythm, breath. It remembers that." You look down at your hands, suddenly self-conscious. How many shirts, how many sheets have you thrown into a machine and forgotten about? She smiles, sensing your thought. "It's not your fault. You're from the loud age." You chuckle softly. She's not wrong. Another washerwoman has begun lifting pieces of cloth out of the brook, shaking them once, then laying them across curved tree roots. You notice she's folding the corners inward, making a neat diamond shape. She catches you watching. "For sleep," she says simply. "Folding that way stops the nightmares from curling into the edges." You nod, not even questioning it anymore. Because here, logic isn't the loudest voice. The night air carries truth softer than that. A breeze brushes your neck. You shiver, not from cold, but from something else. Something like knowing. You glance upward and realize the moon has shifted again. And this time, the light touches the brook in full. It's as if the stream has been waiting for this moment. Suddenly the water sparkles, not like glitter, but like memory waking up. Tiny flecks shimmer in the current. Bits of bark, wool, seed, thread. You can almost imagine them whispering to one another, exchanging stories as they float downstream. And there's a smell now. Not strong, just present. Not rot, not soap, but clean earth. The kind that's been turned by careful hands. A smell of beginnings. The kind that makes you feel like you could wash away things you didn't know were clinging to you. The kind of clean you can't buy in a bottle. The third washerwoman beckons to you now. She has a bowl in her lap, filled with cold brook water and floating herbs. Chamomile, maybe. Or yarrow. "Touch it," she says gently. You dip your fingers in. The water is shockingly cold, but then immediately soothing, like it's pulling heat from your worries. Now drag your hands across the cloth. You do. It's coarse linen, not yet softened by time, but it smells like sleep, like the edge of a pillow that hasn't forgotten you. She hums something slow, her voice hardly rising. "Now it knows you," she whispers. The bowl in your lap, the stars above, the brook behind you, the rhythm of hands that never rush. You lean back, and you swear the fabric in your lap hums back. The brook winds on, its voice lower now, like it knows the hour is late and sleep should be near. You glance at the washerwomen, expecting them to begin packing up, but none move toward leaving. They are not bound by clocks. Their work is not done when the task is complete. It is done when the air tells them so. One of them, the eldest, begins to tie small cloth bundles, not with string, but with the cloth itself, like miniature ghosts folded gently by familiar hands. Inside each bundle, herbs, bits of straw, and fragments of wool. You watch as she dips one bundle into the water, then raises it toward the moonlight. It drips slowly, each drop landing with a soft pat against a nearby stone. "For the threshold," she murmurs, to keep spirits from dragging their feet into your dreams. You blink, then glance behind you instinctively. Nothing stirs, but the silence carries meaning now. The air feels like it's watching or listening, not threatening, just aware. This is the kind of world you've stepped into. A world where linen can sigh, where wind can carry weeping, where cloth becomes prayer, even when folded. "Do you sleep well?" the youngest washerwoman asks, turning her face towards you with an expression that's neither pity nor curiosity. Just knowing. You hesitate. The answer that comes isn't what you expect. Not deeply, you admit. She nods once, not surprised. "Then let me give you something." She reaches beside her, into a satchel made of burlap, worn smooth at the corners. From it, she pulls a square of cloth no bigger than a handkerchief. It's blue, faded, but clearly once vibrant. She holds it out, palm open. This one was steeped in moon tea, dried during the stillest night of the year, stitched with horsehair and a needle never used on anything else. You take it, slowly. It's heavier than you expect, and warm. "Put it under your pillow," she says softly. "Not tonight, next full moon, when the sky feels heavy with thoughts." You nod, unsure what to say. Anything loud would feel wrong here. Instead, you just fold it, carefully, with both hands, just like they showed you. The oldest washerwoman speaks again now, from farther down the riverbank. Her voice is gravel and dusk. "You know, there are cloths that remember things better than people do." You look at her. She is rinsing something dark in the stream, perhaps a mourning veil or a funeral robe. "They carry sorrow, yes," she continues, "but also joy. Births, first dances, the way your mother's hands moved when she wrung out your clothes as a child. Fabric holds memory, like the ocean holds salt, quietly, but always." That line drifts into you like smoke. You want to ask so many things. How do they know which cloth to use? How can they tell what the night will press into the linen? How do they keep their hands so steady in a world this fragile? But your voice feels too big for this space. So instead, you close your eyes, just for a moment, and you hear everything differently now. The stream, no longer just water, but an archive of touch. The hum, not just song, but a spell against forgetting. The air no longer empty, but full of invisible threads, tying you to stories you didn't know you came from. You think of your own home, of your laundry machine rumbling like thunder, of dryers that roast and tumble without ceremony, of clothes that are folded in distraction while your phone buzzes beside you. You wonder how different things might feel if you washed your bed sheets in moonlight instead. If you hummed a lullaby into the pillowcase before sleep. If you believed, truly believed, that cloth remembers. A soft rustle stirs nearby. You open your eyes. The washerwomen are now beginning to hang the final cloths, moving slowly, rhythmically. Each one placed deliberately, corners aligned, hems smoothed. Not one sheet flaps freely. Each is pinned with wooden clips carved from branches. Some even have markings burned into them, sigils or letters maybe. The youngest gestures toward the far side of the bank. There, just beyond the light, you see a small bundle resting on a flat stone, a square of white cloth tied with a red thread. You step closer, and she calls out gently, "For you." You pick it up. It's damp. Inside, something soft shifts when you move it. Dried herbs, maybe lavender, and something denser, perhaps a stone. You look back at her. She just smiles. It remembers you now. You nod. And somehow, deep in your chest, something unclenches. For the first time in a long while, you feel clean. Not just on the outside, inside, in the quietest parts of your thoughts. You look up at the stars. They don't feel far tonight. The brook sings on, and the washerwomen hum a little louder now, not for you, but for the cloths they've just finished. Each piece carrying a blessing you don't need to understand. You sit and listen, as sleep rises from the earth like mist. The hums of the washerwomen now curl like mist over the water, You kneel near the brook, rubbing your palm along a cool, flat stone, the same kind they used to beat the linens. The rhythmic smack of wet cloth echoes in the hush of night. You don't even flinch anymore. It's hypnotic. Tonight the moon is waxing gibbous, not quite full, not quite new. In medieval superstition, that meant something in between. Not a blessing, but not a curse either. An omen in flux. A time when intentions mattered. You feel it now. That pull in the air like the earth itself is breathing a little slower. The washerwomen, of course, know this. Their songs are gentler tonight, like lullabies sung to sleeping rivers. One hums while folding a tunic in careful thirds. Another lays a small apron across the stone, smoothing it with the back of her hand like she's calming a fretful child. The third, she's singing in a language you don't recognize. The vowels trail behind her voice like wisps of smoke. Your eyes drift to the pile of freshly washed linen, folded neatly beside a gnarled root. Each piece is aligned, edges perfect, but they shimmer faintly, like moonlight has stitched itself into the weave. You inch closer. They smell like lavender and cold water, and something else. Fear? There's an old tale around here, older than parchment, older than prayer. They say that once, long ago, a nobleman's son fell in love with a washerwoman. He was enchanted by her voice, by the way she never looked at him, only through him. The romance was doomed, obviously. His family forbade it, her sisters warned her. But love is stubborn. He built her a cottage across the brook, promised he'd run away with her on the next full moon. But the moon waxed and waned, and on the third waning, he vanished. Some say he was taken by the night spirits. Others whisper he tried to cross the water barefoot and the current took him. But most agree, she never sang again. And to this day, her sisters sing for her, not with her. You try to shake the chill off your shoulders. A sudden gust ripples the surface of the brook like a shiver across skin. Now here's where it gets weird. Some fragments of medieval belief claim that rivers could feel, that if a stream heard grief, it would remember it and carry it downstream like a secret. Washerwomen were seen not just as launderers, but as whisperers. They gave the river its sorrow, let it flow with memory instead of blood. And every piece of fabric that touched the water carried just a little of that ache. That's why villagers often left tokens near brooks, bracelets, pins, or bits of thread, especially after losing someone. They thought the river might return it, folded into a clean tunic or wrapped in a shawl. Historians still argue whether this ritual was pagan in origin or merely a misremembered mix of local tradition and early Christianity. But the washerwomen? They didn't argue. They just kept singing. A dog howls in the distance, low and long. You freeze, but the washerwomen don't. One of them lifts a small cloth doll from the pile. It's handmade, lopsided, missing an eye. She holds it to her cheek, hums something low and slow, and gently dips it into the water. There's a debate among folklore scholars about dolls like this. Some say they were grief charms, passed between mothers after a miscarriage or stillbirth. Others believe they were warding objects, meant to carry away illness from a sick child's bed. The washerwomen, of course, say nothing, but you notice the way they handle it. Not like cloth, but like bone. One begins to recite something now, not sung, but spoken. Her voice is cracked like dry bark. You catch a few phrases. The cloth keeps memory, the stone keeps rhythm, the water keeps nothing, except promises. Goosebumps dance up your arms. You're not sure whether it's the words or the stillness that follows. Even the frogs seem to have gone mute. You glance again at the moon. It's just brushing the treetops now, bathing the brook in silver. The washerwomen's reflections stretch long and thin across the water. Except, there's a fourth figure now. You squint. No. It's just a ripple. Just a trick of the current. Or maybe the shadow of a cloud. Except there are no clouds. You rub your eyes. Back in medieval times, washerwomen were sometimes suspected of being something else entirely. Midnight witches, some called them. Harmless by day, but by moonlight, guardians of death linen. Fabric washed in moonlight was sometimes wrapped around corpses, especially those who had died violently or far from home. The belief was that night air made the soul lighter, able to find its way out of the cloth instead of being trapped in it. And so these women weren't just launderers of cloth, they were midwives to the dead. That makes you glance back at the folded pile, neat, precise, reverent, as if each tunic was being laid out not for wear, but for burial. One of the washerwomen catches your eye. Just for a second, her face isn't angry, or sad, or even tired. It's blank, as if she's not really looking at you but past you. And yet, somehow you feel like she knows your name. You want to ask something, but your mouth won't open. Your jaw feels like it's wrapped in wool, so instead you listen. She begins humming again, same melody as before. But now, you hear it differently. It's not a lullaby, it's a warning. You try to move, your legs don't respond. The brook flows steadily, peacefully, patiently, and in your bones you feel something ancient waiting. You hesitate a moment before following the curve of the stream. The water grows quieter here, like it's trying not to wake anyone. Trees lean over the banks like old men huddled around a secret, their branches brushing low against the stream's surface. You hear it again, not the humming this time, but a gentle slosh, fabric smacking against stone. It's rhythmic, like a heartbeat, a lullaby you don't recognize but somehow feel you've always known. The washerwomen aren't visible yet, but their presence hums in the atmosphere like static. You slow your steps, careful not to snap twigs beneath your feet, and peer through the reeds. And there they are. 3 figures, exactly as you imagined, but also not. One stands knee-deep in water, her skirt soaked, her arms working a sheet against a flat river stone. Another crouches beside a basket, picking at seams as if listening to some message woven into the cloth. The third, she's humming again, head tilted, eyes half closed, as if she's remembering a lullaby from a life you never lived. You don't dare speak, you just watch. The moon is higher now, casting silver blue streaks across the stream, and for a moment, it looks like the women glow, but you know it's just light. Probably. Here's a strange thing you didn't expect. They're not young, not old either. Somewhere between ageless and timeless. Their hair's not gray, but not quite youthful. Their hands, though. Those hands have seen thousands of linens, thousands of nights. Rough-knuckled, strong-fingered, ritual-practiced hands. You wonder how many centuries this spot has seen them return, night after night, sheet after sheet, song after song. One of them lifts her head and looks right at you. You freeze, mid-breath. But she only smiles, then goes back to her work, as if to say, "You may watch, but you cannot disturb." So you stay still. And you learn by watching. The first thing you notice is how their movements are less like labor and more like choreography. One bends as another rises. The third twists and wrings out water with a motion that flows into the next beat of the song. It's eerie in the most beautiful way, like you've wandered into a dream carefully stitched into someone's pillowcase. There's no soap, no scrubbing, no harsh gestures, just a pressing of cloth to stone, a lifting, a folding, a rinse. This wasn't just cleaning, this was ritual. Did you know that in some parts of medieval Europe, it was believed that the way you washed a shroud could determine a soul's journey, especially if that person died under strange or sudden circumstances. If you wrung the cloth too tightly, the spirit might become tangled in the next world. If you let it drip too long before drying, the soul might forget its name. Historians still argue whether this was literal belief or poetic symbolism, but one thing's certain: washing the dead's linens was never taken lightly, which makes you wonder, are these linens from the living or the departed? One of the women gently drapes a cloth over a branch to dry. You half expect it to vanish like mist, but it just hangs there, glistening in the moonlight. Another woman reaches into her basket and pulls out what looks like a child's shift. She smooths it on her lap with tenderness that makes your chest ache. Then she begins stitching, slowly, carefully, tiny red X's into the hem. Protective stitches, you remember reading somewhere. Folk embroidery to ward off illness, nightmares, or even fey abductions. They called them witch knots in some regions. Quirky maybe. But in a world with no vaccines or security systems, thread was power. Fabric was armor. And lullabies, spells. It hits you then that the hum they sing isn't just melody. It's enchantment, not to harm, but to soothe, to wrap the night in safety. Back then, fabric was expensive. Sometimes you only owned one set of clothes or a single blanket. That's why villagers often waited for the full moon to wash their linens. It wasn't just for light, it was for blessing. The moon's waxing phase especially symbolized growth and protection. Wash your baby's swaddling cloth on a waxing moon, and maybe, just maybe, they'd grow strong. Wash your husband's cloak while singing your wedding song, and he might return safely from war. Some skeptics say these were just coping mechanisms, rituals to manage anxiety in a chaotic world. But here, watching these three women under the ancient trees, you don't feel skepticism, you feel reverence. You shift slightly and a pebble skitters under your foot. One of the women tilts her head listening. You go still again, and she smiles softly, this time without looking. It feels like she knew you'd come. Not you personally, but someone. As if there's always one dreamer wandering in to witness this nocturnal ballet. You breathe in the scent of wet leaves, riverstone, and something faintly floral. Lavender. Maybe rosemary? Both were common in medieval washhouses, not just for scent, but for protection. Rosemary especially was believed to keep away evil spirits or ill thoughts. Wash a tunic with it, and you might ward off gossip. Wash a nightgown with lavender, and perhaps you'd be spared bad dreams. The women begin to gather their cloths now, folding them slowly, rhythmically. Each fold seems to have intention. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, pause. You wonder if the pauses matter. Maybe they align with some forgotten prayer, or maybe they're just listening for something in the wind. You don't follow them as they begin to retreat down a side path, deeper into the woods. Instead, you linger where they stood, beside the flat river stones. One of the cloths is still hanging to dry, soft, pale, embroidered with a tiny knot at each corner. You resist the urge to touch it. Some things are meant to be observed, not handled. Above you, the moon swells just a bit more. The stream hums like it's memorizing the lullaby. And you? You finally let out that breath you were holding. The brook runs slower here. You step carefully, the pebbles beneath your feet slick with centuries of moss. Ahead, you spot them again, the washerwomen, now further upstream where the trees thin, letting the moon drape silver lace across the water's skin. They don't see you yet. One of them is singing. No, chanting. You can't catch the words at first, only the lilting rise and fall of vowels that seem too old to be English. It's rhythmic, slow, and purposeful. The way someone might sing while weaving, or praying, or both. You crouch behind a twisted willow root and just listen. As you watch, the oldest woman lifts a wet linen sheet from the water and wrings it with surprising strength. Then she drapes it on a crooked branch and begins murmuring into it. The other two hum behind her. It's eerie, almost hypnotic. And then it hits you. They're speaking to the cloth, not just drying it, blessing it, or perhaps cursing it. In medieval villages, you remember reading, it was believed that fabric could hold words, not just in embroidered prayers or stitched initials, but literally absorb sound. The folds of freshly washed sheets were thought to drink in the intentions of the one who hung them. A whispered secret here, a lullaby there, a curse if someone was angry. Even silence, some said, could imprint a feeling of emptiness on cloth. That's why mothers often sang to their babies' raps, not just to soothe the child, but to protect the fabric from absorbing the wrong energy. And that's also why washerwomen, especially at night, were feared as much as they were relied upon. Because if you believed cloth could carry words, then the person who washed your linens held incredible power. The eldest washerwoman now waves a hand over the hanging sheet and says something sharp, a word you don't know, and all three fall silent. The night presses in. Historians still argue whether this practice was mere folklore or a true ritual. Some suggest it was symbolic, a kind of peasant theater meant to bring comfort during uncertain times. Others argue it was more sinister, that certain washerwomen had reputations as hedge witches, that they were paid not just in coin, but in secrecy, paid to bless, protect, or hex. The line between washerwoman and wise woman was, apparently, very thin. You exhale, your breath curling in the cool air. Some of the old superstitions start to make more sense now, like how people believed washing clothes at night could invite spirits, or how a sudden shift in the wind while drying bedsheets was a sign that someone in the household might fall ill. The washerwomen were caught in the middle, guardians of fabric, and thus, of fate. A quirky detail sticks with you. In 13th century France, it was said that if you listened closely to linens drying under a waxing moon, you might hear faint humming, not from the wind, but from the cloth itself, the voices of the women who'd sung to it. Which makes you wonder, is that what you're hearing now? Because the linens hanging here seem to vibrate faintly, not with wind, but with song, as if the fabric remembers. And just like that, your foot slips slightly, sending a pebble clattering into the water. All three women turn at once. Their eyes, even from this distance, lock onto you. You freeze. They don't speak. They don't scold. But the humming stops, and now without it, the night feels too quiet. You rise slowly, unsure whether to apologize or flee. But the old woman simply raises one bony finger to her lips. Shh. It's not a threat, more of a reminder. The cloth is listening. You don't run. You should, maybe. But something deeper than fear roots you in place. A sense that you've crossed a threshold, not just in space, but in time. The washerwomen don't advance. They turn back slowly, wordlessly, as though your presence was nothing more than a breeze that passed. The oldest resumes her murmuring. The middle-aged one returns to folding. And the youngest, now barely visible, begins brushing out her own long hair with her fingers. A gesture smooth and ancient. You back away slowly, heart pounding. Not from terror exactly, but reverence. You feel like a child who just opened a door they weren't meant to. Not punished for it, but forever changed. As the trees swallow the moonlight again and you make your way back toward the village path, a strange scent floats through the air. Lavender, crushed sage, old stone, and something else. The crisp smell of line-dried linen, freshly whipped by river wind. You glance once more over your shoulder. The bridge is empty. Only the sound of water remains, and the occasional flap of a damp cloth in the breeze. Centuries ago, villagers believed that wet laundry could tangle with a person's soul. That if someone died with unfinished washing still on the line, their spirit would linger. Not in the house, not in the grave, but in the very fabric itself. That's why many funeral rites involved burning clothes, not burying them. Some old houses even kept a dedicated soul line, a short rope strung in the back garden, not for drying, but for giving ghosts a place to rest their garments before moving on. And now, standing in the edge of this forgotten wood, you wonder, how many spirits once paused here? How many stories hung and dried in the cold night air before dissolving into mist? It's not grief you feel, nor fear. It's history. Living, breathing history, whispered through rivers, stone, and cloth. You return to the village with wet shoes and a racing mind. The houses are still. The hearths sleep. But your ears still echo with lullabies hummed through linen and leaves. In bed, under your own thick blanket, you think about the sheet the old woman whispered to, about the words she spoke to it, not shouted, but offered like a gift, a spell, or a memory. You wonder what your sheets remember, your clothes, the fabric that touches your body every day. What do they hold? What have they heard? Some say fabric has no memory. Others say memory is all it has. Just thread upon thread, looping through time, catching whispers we forget to keep. But tonight, you remember, because you saw them. The washerwomen of Moonlit Bridge, and the cloth, still listening, still humming, even now. And now you sleep, but not like before, because something in your soul has shifted, like a freshly folded sheet laid down smooth and deliberate. Something in your chest breathes a little slower, as if rocked by lullabies that have drifted down the centuries. The night outside stretches wide and wordless, but in your dreams, you see them again. The three washerwomen, not as phantoms, not as ghosts, but as guardians, ancient keepers of quiet memory, pulling forgotten threads from time's tapestry and washing them clean. They're not washing to remove stains, you realize. They're washing to remember. Each garment soaked in laughter, in tears, in whispered prayers stitched into sleeves. They lift the past from fabric not to erase, but to honor, folding it carefully, placing it back into the stream of memory, where it will dry in the moonlight and live forever. And in that dream, something falls into your hands. A small hand-stitched cloth. Faded. Familiar. You unfold it. It's yours. From years ago. A shirt you lost. A scarf once given in love and left on a train. Or a blanket from childhood, with soft edges chewed away by time. It still smells like you, but also like her, the youngest washerwoman, and somehow, like home. You wake up with a start, but not from fear. The kind of start where silence holds you like a cradle. You sit up, press a hand to your chest, and notice your shirt is damp, just slightly, as if mist had passed through the walls and laid a kiss on your collarbone. You blink, reach beside you. Your clothes are all where you left them, dry, still. But in the corner of the room, just where the first gray light of dawn begins to paint the floorboards, a line of water, a gentle trail, as though a soaked hem had been dragged across the wood, or as if something had stood there, watching, waiting, leaving no footprints, just one final blessing. Outside, the river runs as always. The bridge sits in silence, worn by time but still proud. The washerwomen? Gone. Or maybe never there. Or maybe always there, not in flesh and blood, but in ritual, in memory, in the sacred rhythm of wash and ring and whisper. The world will forget them again, as it always does, until someone new comes walking through the woods, until someone hears the hush of fabric in the trees, the lull of river song in the leaves, until someone listens. Because some stories aren't spoken, they're soaked, wrung, hung, and if you're quiet enough, you'll hear them, not in words, but in threads, in the hush of a flapping sheet, in the sigh of wet linen in the wind, in the soft chant of hands who remember for us all, the washerwomen of Moonlit Bridge, not ghosts, not witches, something older, something sacred. And tonight, you were part of the wash.